My parents demanded me share my store with my adopted sister, but I refused and cut them off. I'm a 24-year-old guy who grew up in what looked like your typical suburban middle-class family from the outside. But my parents' behavior has been a constant source of pain throughout my life. They built this whole reputation in our community as these amazing people who adopted a little girl and loved her even more than their biological son. That would be me. When I was 6, they adopted Emma, who's now 21. Back then, I was excited. I was a lonely kid, spending afternoons alone while my parents worked. No siblings, no friends nearby. Having someone to play with seemed like the best thing ever. And honestly, at first, it was great. We play together, share toys, laugh all afternoon. Typical kid stuff. But then things started changing, little by little. Everything began revolving around Emma. If she wasn't feeling it, family plans got canceled. Dinner? Whatever Emma wanted. School events? They'd never miss hers, but had no problem skipping mine. I basically became invisible in my own home. To make it worse, my mom quit her accounting job, a job she kept even after I was born, to be a stay-at-home mom for Emma. When I was a kid, they were always stressed about money, leaving me with teenage babysitters who cared more about their boyfriends than me. I'd spend hours alone, sometimes hearing their boyfriends sneaking into the house. I told my parents, but the cycle never stopped. I figured things would get better when Emma came. Instead, it felt like I faded into the background even more. The birthday thing was probably the worst. Since Emma's adoption paperwork didn't include a birth date, my parents decided she'd share mine. They called it a special bond. At first, I didn't really mind, but year after year, my birthday became her day. Relatives would show up with twice as many presents for her, going on and on about how special it was that we shared a birthday. Nobody seemed to care about the actual birthday boy. I just quietly opened my gifts while everyone crowded around Emma, listening to her adoption story for what felt like the millionth time. By the time I was 10, I dreaded birthdays. Emma picked the themes: princesses, unicorns, things that made me feel like an outsider at my own party. My parents let her invite 20 friends, while I was allowed 5. When I asked to invite one extra friend, they said we couldn't fit more people. Funny, because there was always space for Emma's guests and their moms. I asked once if I could have my own party. My parents looked at me like I was heartless. Emma doesn't even have a birthday, they said. You should learn to stop asking. The one bright spot in all this was discovering my love for creating things with my hands. It started small, turning an empty cereal box into a pencil holder one boring afternoon. Soon I was transforming all sorts of household items into art pieces. Our garage became my go-to place, filled with bins of collected materials, old newspapers, plastic bottles, broken jewelry, anything I could repurpose. I spent hours watching DIY videos, learning new techniques for making everything from decorative wall hangings to intricate jewelry pieces. My room slowly filled up with my creations. This was finally something that was just mine, something Emma couldn't take over. What started as just a way to cope in my teens turned into a legit online business by my early 20s. I'd stay up late working on product photos, writing descriptions, and managing my online shop while holding down a day job at a coffee shop. My stuff started getting noticed on social media, and pretty soon I had regular customers from all over the country. My tiny apartment turned into a workshop, shelves everywhere full of supplies, and I even set up a shipping station where my dining room should have been. After 3 years of careful planning, working overtime, and putting almost every penny back into the business, I finally saved enough to open my own store. I found this perfect spot, an old boutique in a busy shopping area with these amazing big windows and exposed brick walls. I signed the lease 2 months ago and poured everything into planning the layout, designing displays, and organizing this killer grand opening. When I told my parents about the store opening, guess what happened? They were excited for about 5 minutes before my mom chimed in with, Emma's graduating the same week. Why don't we combine the celebrations? Combine? My store opening, a moment I'd worked years for, with Emma's graduation. My dad nodded along like it was the most logical thing ever. I refused immediately, explaining that I wanted this celebration to focus on my achievement. My parents looked shocked at my resistance, like they couldn't understand why I wouldn't want to share this moment too. They kept pushing, saying I was being difficult and selfish, using all their old guilt trips about making things easier for everyone. Same old lines I'd heard my whole life. It's just one day, and why can't you be more understanding? But this time was different. I'd built this business from scratch, staying up late filing orders, dealing with tough customers, teaching myself everything about running a company through trial and error. So I stood my ground. For the first time, their guilt trips didn't work. When they realized I wasn't backing down, they threatened not to come at all. And for the first time in my life, I told them that was their choice to make. Then someone gave me an interesting idea: go along with their plan, but use it to my advantage. So I told them I'd reconsidered and thought they were right about having one big celebration. Man, they were thrilled, probably thinking their guilt trips had worked again. I played along during all the planning meetings, nodding as they discussed decorations and food. Just like I expected, they took over everything. They contacted all our relatives and family friends, organized the catering, and booked an expensive venue, all centered around Emma's graduation theme. Every decision was made according to Emma's preferences, from the color scheme to the type of music that would be played. The invitation cards they sent out were the final confirmation that I'd made the right decision. They designed these fancy gold bordered cards with celebrating Emma's graduation in large, elegant letters across the top. My store announcement wasn't mentioned anywhere, not even in the small print at the bottom. At the party, I waited until right after all the speeches, but before they cut the cake. The bartender caught my eye and handed me a fresh glass of champagne. Everyone turned to look at me, probably expecting another speech about Emma. I'd worked with the venue staff earlier to set up my promotional materials while my parents were busy greeting guests. My announcement was short and sweet, no fancy language needed. I just announced that after years of building my online business, I was opening my first physical store next month. Within minutes, people were crowding around me, asking about the store location, what products I carry, and what kind of friends and family discounts I'd offer. My aunt, who just finished gushing about Emma's grades, was now showing everyone pictures of my products on her phone. Emma vanished from her own graduation party right after her champagne toast fell flat, with barely anyone paying attention to her practice speech about her amazing college journey. Once the last relative drove away and the catering staff began cleaning up, my mom finally let her facade crack. She cornered me. The same woman who had spent years teaching me to share the spotlight was now accusing me of ruining her precious daughter's graduation celebration. I explained my position calmly, pointing out that this joint celebration was their idea, not mine, and that I had simply made an announcement about my business as planned. My father's reaction revealed just how deeply their favoritism ran. Instead of acknowledging their years of unequal treatment, he immediately jumped to accusing me of jealousy. I finally said what I'd been holding back for 20 years. I laid out every birthday, every celebration, every moment that had been hijacked and transformed into Emma's special time. For once, I wasn't asking for understanding or approval. I was simply stating facts about their pattern of behavior. My parents fell back on their usual defense strategy, recycling the same excuses they'd used throughout our childhood. Once again, they brought up Emma's abandonment, her difficult start in life, and how she needed extra support because she didn't know her biological family. These were the same justifications I'd heard at every birthday, every school event, and every family gathering where my needs had been pushed aside. But this time, their words didn't make me feel guilty. I'd spent years processing these feelings with my therapist, understanding that their behavior wasn't about Emma's needs. It was about their need to be seen as saviors. What none of us realized was that Emma had returned to the venue and was standing in the doorway during our confrontation. She burst into the room, mascara running down her face, putting on the emotional display that had always worked so well in the past. Her accusations, claiming that I had always hated her, that I was jealous of her place in the family. The reality was that I'd spent my childhood trying to be the perfect big brother, giving up my space and my celebrations while being told it was never enough. Now she was acting like she'd been the victim of my resentment rather than the beneficiary of our parents' constant favoritism. The days following the party showed just how deeply entrenched my parents' favoritism was. Instead of acknowledging how their actions had contributed to the situation, they focused entirely on Emma's hurt feelings. They called me repeatedly, demanding not just an apology, but suggesting I should finance a vacation for Emma to help her recover from the stress. The absurdity of their request was stunning. They wanted me to spend thousands of dollars to compensate Emma because people had shown genuine interest in my business achievement instead of her graduation. Their solution to Emma feeling overshadowed at one party was to demand I hand over my hard-earned money to fund her holiday. My response to their demands was simple. I walked away. I'd moved out at 21, using my early online business profits to rent a small apartment across town. Since then, our relationship has been pretty surface level: birthday messages, major life updates, occasional family gatherings. But there's no real connection anymore. Then, right before my store opening, they showed up at my place uninvited. At first, they acted casual, asking about store preparations while sitting awkwardly on my couch. Then they dropped their real reason for visiting. They wanted me to hire Emma as the store manager. Their reasoning? She has a degree, so she shouldn't have to job hunt. My dad actually said her main qualifications were that she was smart, had a generic business degree, and was pretty, as if looks had anything to do with running a retail business. They even wanted her to cut the ribbon at the opening to make up for feeling overshadowed at her graduation party. Of course, I said no. They reacted exactly how you'd expect. First came the guilt trips, then accusations of being selfish, and finally the threats. My mom delivered their ultimatum with the same certainty she used when forcing me to share my birthdays. Either I gave Emma what she wanted, or they wouldn't come to the store opening. Emma had this smug look on her face during the whole thing, like she just knew I'd cave like I always had before. Instead, I did something that shocked all of them. I just said okay, and told them not to come at all. The look on their faces was priceless. The store opening ended up being amazing. Friends, customers, and extended family all showed up to support me. My parents didn't come, and honestly, for the first time, I didn't care. Their silent treatment used to hurt, but now it just feels peaceful. It's been a few months now, and the business is doing great. My parents still don't get why their guilt trips don't work on me anymore. But I've finally learned something important. I don't need their approval. I don't need to share my achievements. This life I've built, it's mine, and I did it on my own terms. You know what's funny? The day I stopped trying to get their approval was the day I finally felt free. Sure, they still try their old tricks sometimes, the guilt trips, the silent treatment, the family-first speeches. But now I see them for what they are: attempts to control me that only worked because I let them. Looking back, building my business wasn't just about making art or running a store. It was about building myself, finding out who I am outside of being Emma's brother or the kid who needs to share. Every piece I create, every sale I make, every decision I take for my store, they're all mine. And that's worth more than any approval my parents could give me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.